Create a life of entrepreneurial freedom with insights from successful creatives, entrepreneurs, and investors. Discover how they overcame challenges and turned their biggest dreams into reality. They share their personal success playbook so you can build the business and life you truly want. Welcome to Passion Millionaire, the podcast by Robert Roth. Rock and roll your dreams.
Welcome to today's episode of the Passion Millionaire Podcast. I'm excited as always because we have a very unique and very experienced guest here today, Ral West, who has 40 plus years of entrepreneurial experience, serial entrepreneur, has built one business even together with her husband for over 25 years, up to an 8-figure revenue business. And that was called Hawaiian Vacations. So that one has even been sold to Alaska Airlines. So I'm super excited to learn all about that story, how that started and how that grew and then how it came to an exit. Aside of that, she's even a best-selling author and is now in a phase where she's also helping a ton of other entrepreneurs to actually scale their business in a very healthy way. So please welcome Ral West. Feel free, Ral, to reintroduce yourself. Let us know a little bit more about yourself. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Robert. Well, I would say that I'm saying hello to everyone from Alaska, from a little town called Sitka, Alaska on the Pacific Ocean. And I'm originally from Seattle, and I grew up in a family business selling tourism in Alaska. My father was kind of noted as being the founder of Alaska tourism. So it's in my blood, in my DNA.
Love it. When you say your father was the founder of Alaska tourism, what exactly does that mean? Was he the first person to actually bring tourists there, or let us know about that?
Well, not really the first to bring tourists there, but he was the one that created sort of the system that opened Alaska up to the masses. And he had cruise ships, he had motor coaches, he had hotels, and he designed tour patterns throughout Alaska that are still being used today. And he started in like 1945 in Fairbanks, Alaska. So he sold his first business to Holland America Line, but then he started another business and carried on and had small cruise ships. And one of my husband's and my businesses along the way was also owning small cruise ships and leasing them to a cruise line. So we kind of followed in the family footprint there.
Oh, wow. So you're saying your father, as well as you with your company, you did own the actual ship?
Yeah, small ships though,
Okay.
under 100 passengers.
All right.
Yeah.
But wow, I find that quite exciting. What a story already.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically your father kind of built the ground for a lot of the tourism that is now happening in Alaska. I mean, that's a really big thing. That sounds like a huge movement that he has started there. And we have just talked a little bit about that also, Alaska tourism, and that I have friends who are really excited about that. So how did you carry on with what your father has built? Did you first take over a company that he had built and then rolled with that? Or how did that go?
No, I worked in the family company, his second business, when I was in my 20s. And after several years, I decided that working for my father was not the best thing for me. So I left. And very soon after that, I was offered a job as a director of marketing for a tour company in Ketchikan, Alaska, which is the farthest south in Alaska. And about a year later, I realized, working for somebody else is not my thing. I'd rather be working for myself. And so I decided to move to Anchorage, which was further north and the big city in Alaska. And I opened a business that was focusing on tourism, but doing marketing consulting. So I helped small business owners in Alaska involved in tourism, help them get their product to their customers. And to begin with, I was also representing some companies in Hawaii who wanted to sell to Alaskans, because Hawaii is actually the favorite vacation playground for Alaskans, which makes a lot of sense. In the wintertime, Alaska is rather cold and dark, most of it. And Hawaii is, bright sunshine and beaches and, sand, sun, and surf. So Alaskans
Yep.
love going there. So in the early days of my young business, I moved into an office space that was like an executive suite. So I had a small office. We shared a reception area. And there was a young man across the hall who had his own small business involving real estate. And he saw me flying off to Hawaii on business trips. And his reaction was, I like Hawaii. I'd like to go there for free on a business trip. And like, how do I figure this out? So he started picking my brain. We'd meet in the hallway or, talk in the evenings or whatever. We both tended to work late. And he decided that he would represent Alaskans who owned vacation condominiums in Hawaii. A lot of Alaskans do. And he would be their rental agent. So he would rent them to vacationers and get a commission. And I said, well, that's an interesting idea, but why not package the stay in the condominium with rental cars and inter-island air and make it a whole vacation? So he took my advice, and then he later followed my advice and added the air segment from Alaska to Hawaii. So he was able to buy seats on scheduled airlines and just buy the seats that he needed. And that was kind of the beginning of Hawaiian Vacations. We also got married in the meantime. So,
What a time.
Less than a year after we met, we were married. And so I kept up with my business, but continued to advise him as he grew this other business. And then in a few years, his business hit a very large crisis point.
Oh,
because, the scheduled carriers that were flying nonstop Anchorage, Honolulu, decided not to fly that route anymore. So all of a sudden, we had no way to get our customers to Hawaii. They couldn't buy our packages because they couldn't get to Hawaii. In order to get to Hawaii from Alaska, if we didn't have nonstop flights, you'd have to fly to Seattle or San Francisco or Los Angeles and then go over. So it became a lot longer, a lot more expensive. And, so basically, the revenue of the company just dropped like a rock.
Wow. So there was literally only one airline who had direct flights. That was it at that time. Okay. Yep. So how did you resolve that?
Well, we considered just closing the doors. The first, it was like they left in the spring. And that summer, I was also representing a tourism organization in Dawson City in the Yukon. And I said, okay, we'll package tours to Dawson. And, I know how to do this because I have the connections. So we did that. And he sold a few, but Dawson did not have quite the appeal that Hawaii did. So it wasn't enough to cover the overhead of the business. And we got to the point where we were making payroll by taking cash advances on our personal credit cards.
Okay.
So we had lunch one day and said, should we just shut the doors? Should we just close up shop and you can go back to selling real estate and, just move on? And then we thought, no, wait a minute. The people of Alaska and Hawaii really love this service and there's a demand for it and they want it and they need it. We've got to figure this out. We have to find a way to provide this service to them. So, my husband found out about an airplane, a DC-8, that was being chartered for a series of flights between Alaska and Japan. And he found out that the plane wasn't being used all the time. So there was enough time on that aircraft that we could do a round trip between Anchorage and Honolulu. And he approached the airline and said, I could make you money with that plane instead of having it just fly empty or be sitting there. And he negotiated and we got a contract to charter that airplane, a DC-8. So like I said, I don't remember exactly how many passengers it was, but close to 200 passengers. Yeah. And we flew approximately once a week. And everybody thought we were nuts. You're crazy. Summertime is not the time when Alaskans go to Hawaii. But they didn't know that Hawaiians like coming to Alaska in the summertime. So I got out this.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I got out the spreadsheets and looked at the numbers and said, okay, in previous summers, we have been able to produce X amount of seats. We sold X number of seats. And I
Yep.
counted up the number of seats that were on this series of charters that we were going to do. And it's like, yeah, okay, the numbers crunch. We can do this. So
Wow,
we
I
did.
find that so interesting. What a move. Basically,
Yeah. Well,
hiring or chartering your own plane. Like,
yeah, we
and it's a big
basically,
plane,
yeah,
200 seats. I mean, it's a real thing. I was imagining, okay, maybe that's a
the
super small plane with, I don't know,
yeah,
20
okay,
seats or something like
yeah,
that. But
no,
wow.
no. So yeah, we bet the farm on this because we had to guarantee
Okay.
the entire cost of the plane. So we were paying the same amount whether we sold one seat or sold all
Yep.
of them.
Wow.
So
Okay.
this was
Full response.
like, okay, yeah, we can do this.
How did you
And-
sell those seats, and how in general did the clients
yeah.
come to you and find you, or how did you reach out so they,
Well,
could get in touch with you?
this is 1991, and in
Yeah,
those
exactly.
in those days, the bookings came through travel agents mostly. There were still lots of travel agencies in those days, and internet was not a big thing yet. And so people would call. They'd call their travel agent. The travel agent would call us, and we had to have people, answering the phones and taking the bookings. And my husband he was always a good salesman. He convinced me to marry him after all, and Um, he just became the most extraordinary salesman, particularly that summer. And he was just beating the pavement, calling on travel agents and making sure that they knew about the air service and making sure that they knew what we were doing. And in Hawaii as well, because we wanted Hawaiians to come to Alaska. And so, yeah, we sold every seat. We did amazingly well. And,
Wow.
and then we were like, oh, okay, this works. This is the new business plan. So then we found, mostly he was the one who was finding the jets. So he found bigger planes, wide body jets, like 767s and L-1011s. I think the L-1011 carried 362 passengers. And so we started doing not just once a week, but several times a week. And that's
Wow.
how we grew to eventually we were carrying like 35,000 passengers a year between
Wow.
Alaska and Hawaii. So, yeah.
That is super impressive. So how many
Yeah.
travel agencies were you working together with in order to make that happen? Trying to
I think,
understand the infrastructure that you had built in order to fill so many seats.
well, okay, Alaska's population is pretty small. It's
Yeah.
less than a million. In those days, it was maybe 600,000, 650,000. So there were about maybe 50 travel agencies in Alaska. So it wasn't
Hey, that's it.
wasn't that big. Yeah, but
Yeah.
we were also advertising, newspaper, radio, and television. That people don't need to do that these days. They just go online. And so
Yep.
to begin with, that's how we did it. It was just, advertising and talking to the travel agents. We would have trade shows. We would bring the vendors from Hawaii to Alaska and put on a show for the travel agents and say, here's everything we've got. We'd have people representing their condominium or their hotel or their rental car agency. And we'd
Mhm.
put on a big thing. We called it Aloha Week. And we went all
Okay.
over the city, doing taking hula dancers to the big malls and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, we were just bringing Hawaii to Alaska. We did it all.
Okay.
And
Wow. That's I love it. What
yeah,
a thing.
yeah. And in about 8 years later, we got to the point where we realized we could not grow the company if we still had to rely on people answering the phone to take a reservation. And we had a number of challenges during those years. Actually, our customer service had a very bad reputation for a while because people were sitting on hold, waiting half an hour,
Mhm.
an hour and a half to talk to one of our sales agents. And we had to keep getting more and
Wow.
more phone lines. And we, kept talking to the utilities in Anchorage saying, we need more phone lines. We need more capacity. We need more, we
Yeah.
couldn't keep up with the demand.
Okay. Wow.
So we said, we need to figure out a way to do online bookings. By that time, the internet had taken hold, but there were no software companies that were selling a software package that could do what we needed to have them do.
Yep.
Big airlines had their huge reservation systems, and they were just starting. In fact, they weren't even really taking bookings from the general public via computers. Travel agencies would have a computer that they could hook into the airline system. But the average, customer, you and I, would still call the airline or call a travel agent. So having an online system where 24/7 anybody could book their trip to Hawaii, that was groundbreaking.
And how did you make people start using this? And did you then shut off your phone support completely or partially?
No,
How did that go?
no. Yeah, we didn't have to shut it down completely, but at one point we had a staff of like 50 people. And after a while, once we flipped the switch, it took 2 years to develop the software. And it was over 6 digits in cost. And that was a lot for a little company, 30 years ago. Once of course, we used advertising to get the word out. You don't have to call us anymore. Just go online, HawaiianVacations.com, And I remember back in the days when this URL thing, it's like, oh God, people are never going to be able to remember all that stuff. How do you remember that? But no, it worked. So HawaiianVacations.com, and we changed the logo and everything so that people would know that they could go online. And the business just, pardon the pun, it took off. I mean, it just like a plane, And over a period of a few months, we were able to cut our staff in half. So it saved us that much in labor. We still had people on the phone, but they didn't have to be, working, because we were trying to have people available on weekends and nights and, anything we could to make sure that there was somebody there to answer the phone. But we didn't have to do that anymore.
And how long did it take you to bring back the money that you had invested into the software? Like how many months? It sounds like months.
Less than a year. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Great move.
Yeah, it was. It was a game changer for sure. And we were innovative, and we took a chance. And we told the software company, we don't want to be the beta. We want to have a product that's already tested. No, we were the beta. Because they'd never done it before. They'd never done it before, so we were kind of teaching them what we needed. This is what we need the software to be able to do, because it wasn't just selling seats on a plane. That was relatively easy. We had many, many different condominiums, hotels, rental car companies, all of these other pieces, the inner island air, flying between Maui and Oahu or to the Big Island. All of these pieces had to come together, and somebody had to be able to book all of these little segments to make their vacation package. And all that inventory had to be loaded into the system in order for it to be there for somebody to book. It was very complicated. We had a team of people in our company that was dedicated to just making sure that all of that product was in the system and loaded properly.
Yeah,
it was huge.
Yeah, I can kind of see this in front of my inner eye, because I was in software development also for a part of my life. Therefore,
yeah,
I can imagine how that went, how much work must have gone into this, just planning this and figuring out if everything will work out well, and then actually developing it, and then going through all of those loops until
and how to collect the money, and what to do if somebody wants to make a change, and all of it. And communicating, because once we booked a hotel, for example, then we had to make sure that they knew that those people were coming. So there was a whole nother system of communication between us and our vendors.
Yep. I'm so curious about 2 more things. I mean, that's a crazy story that you have to tell here. You told us you somehow owned a cruise ship, or potentially even multiple of those. But I mean, how did you end up owning a cruise ship?
Well, that was later, after we grew Hawaiian Vacations. And now the important part of this for entrepreneurs who are listening is that John and I were, by the time we started chartering jets, I decided to close my own business because I needed to devote full time to this effort because we had, as I said, bet the farm on it. So it's like, okay, you've got
Yeah.
my attention. I'm with you now. So I handled the marketing and the human resources and team building and training and hiring and all that kind of stuff, while John made sure that we had the product. He made sure that we had the planes, the condos, the hotels, all that kind of stuff. So so we made a good team,
Yeah.
but we were working all the time. And, if we went on vacation, we had our phones or we were, we just couldn't get away from it. Our oldest daughter remembers going to the office after school and,
Mhm.
Maybe she did homework, maybe she just watched a video, or maybe she helped some of our staff putting labels on brochures and things like that. I mean, and then we would eat fast food in the office for dinner. And, I'm going, this is terrible. This is no way there's no family life. This is no way to raise a kid. And so we have to do this differently. We have to figure out a way to get us out of being the ones doing all of it. So I started learning. I went back to college. We had a mentor in those days. We were working with Robert Kiyosaki, who has written, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Everybody's heard about him.
Yep.
Well, we were working with him before he wrote the book, so he wasn't famous back then.
Oh, interesting.
But
Okay.
we were taking classes from him. He would come to Anchorage and do a weekend workshop, and we would take those classes with him. And I remember that we had lunch with him on the Big Island in Hawaii in 1994. He was there doing some kind of workshop, and we were on the island. So we said, "Hey, Robert, let's get together for lunch." We went to his hotel, had lunch by the pool, and we told him what was going on with our business. And he said, "Okay, you guys need to buy these 2 books." He said,
Mhm.
"Buy the E-Myth by Michael Gerber and Buy the Great Game of Business by Jack Stack."
Mhm.
And we bought those books that same afternoon. We had flown to Oahu, bought them,
Mhm.
read them, went back to Anchorage and said, "Okay, team, we're doing things differently from now on." And
Yep.
we just applied the lessons from those books
So what
immediately.
would have been the main lessons that you have started
Mhm.
applying that up?
Well, from the E-Myth, it's, create systems, make sure that you document every process and that
Right.
everyone has written steps and procedures and policies. What does each person do? And get it documented so thoroughly that when you hire a new person, you can just hand that manual to them and they know how to do that job.
Right.
And that every function in the business needs to have a dedicated person, wearing that hat. Because the E-Myth, Michael Gerber's premise is that oftentimes entrepreneurs, they're really good at whatever their trade is, whether they're making donuts or a plumber or whatever, and
Mhm.
they do their craft, but they don't know how to be a manager, a marketer, a finance person, all of these things,
Yep.
and they have to learn how to wear all those hats if it's going to be a one person show. Or when they bring people on, they need to make sure that each person, okay, this is your role. This is the hat that you're wearing, and this is your role, and so forth. So we got much more clarity amongst our team as to, okay, who is doing what. And we started, dividing the work up into departments, and then we'd have department heads, and got much more systematized in how we train people. I remember in 1992, before this, phones were ringing off the hook, things were crazy. And I was interviewing a person and I said, "Great, you're hired. Now the phone is ringing. Go answer the phone and take a booking."
Yeah.
And that was the training.
That's a training. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see.
And
We're
she
very
stayed with it.
hands-on, super quick,
Yeah.
fast,
Yeah.
pragmatic.
Right. It's really good service, right? Ugh. So that person ended up staying with us for over 20 years. It was
Okay.
amazing. She was fantastic. But, I went, "Oh, this is not how we train people. This is not how we onboard." So,
Right.
we had to systematize the training. And we got to the point where we would hire a cohort of reservations agents, like maybe there'd be half a dozen or 8 or so. And we'd set up a 2-week training program. We had a conference room and we, put them all in the conference room and had a curriculum. And this is what was going to happen every day for 2 weeks. And we paid them to be part of the training. And then we said, not all of you will be hired. Depends on how you do. We'll see how it goes. And then we would see how they did in the training and decide whether or not they were hired.
So what did that
So,
do to your business once you made those type of changes?
oh, well, yeah. I mean, for one thing, John and I were able to gradually step back from being, just inundated all the time to
Yeah.
being able to look at the bigger picture and make some bigger decisions and plan and strategize better. And it empowered our team because Jack Stack's message was use open book management. And we're like, okay, what's that? And he said, share your financials with your team. Let them see how you're doing. And all the business people that we knew said, don't do that. That's crazy. Share it with your employees, your financials, so they know all of your numbers. No, don't do that. And we said, no, well, this theory makes sense. This author was, making a good case for it. So we're going to try it. And we did. And to begin with, our people just kind of looked at us wide-eyed and like, what's a P&L? What's a balance sheet? They had no clue.
Yeah.
These were a lot of our folks were entry-level people. Some of them only had high school education. Some of them were even teenagers when we hired them. So
Mhm.
they had no clue. So I said, okay, I have to teach them. So I would conduct little training classes on this is a financial statement and this is how you read it. And we would just go line by line and we would talk about what went on every line. And then, most importantly is how does everything flow to the bottom line? Because this is the
Yeah.
profit. And this is what we're after is the profit. If we don't have the profit, you don't have a job. We don't have a company, So, so what we did was get alignment of our team members. They got so excited because the other thing we did was we said, okay, our philosophy, our culture is win-win. So when we win, you win. We get this profit goal, we're going to share it with you. And when we started doing that, even to the point of sometimes we would have a goal that was just for a month. Like if we hit a particular revenue target for a month, we would hand out $100 bills at the staff meeting.
Okay.
And everybody was very excited about that.
Yeah.
Now,
Imagine that.
even today, even though $100 buys a heck of a lot less than it did back then, it would still be exciting to get a $100 bill handed to you.
Sure. Having $100, not having $100, especially if it comes like you have put work into it, and that's a bonus kind of.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So our team just got very cohesive and very aligned. And we called ourselves the Ohana. And the word Ohana in Hawaiian is family. So we were a family and we all worked together towards the same goals. And the company just grew into this very well-oiled machine. So much so that by 1999, John and I said, okay, we're ready to hand this off. We hired a chief operating officer and a chief financial officer. And we said, here's our baby. Here's how we built it. This is our culture. And we don't want you to vary from that. You got to maintain our culture.
Right.
And these are our rules. And this is what we want you to do with it. And they were fabulous. They took the company and grew it even more.
Okay. That's awesome. How big was the company by the time when you were handing it off to your two new executives?
Yeah, well, that was right around 50 employees, and
Okay.
I think
And
we were
revenue by?
I think we were low 8 digits by that time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
So
wow, you pulled something off. How many years into that company were you at by that time?
17.
That was 17 years in. Like, wow, I'm impressed. As I said also before we started recording, like, I mean, that's some dedication, right? Like sticking
Yeah.
with that one business for decades, because it was then even a little longer than 17 years, right?
Yeah.
I want to point that out. What an achievement that is, just, sticking with it and then having this success, growing a culture as you've just described, that I believe it sounds extremely healthy to me. It sounds exciting if you're calling your
Yeah,
team
it
a
was
family, and if they produce the results, and you have proven that the company grew, the numbers were there, you were able
yeah.
to then replace yourself with
Yeah.
executives and then put yourself on a different
Yeah.
seat. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Well, I know
huge.
we were doing so well that we were paying the U.S. government 7 digits for income tax, and I didn't
Wow.
like that.
Yeah.
I complained to my father, and he said, "Just be happy that you did that well." You know? I'm
That's
like,
a way to see that.
"No, I don't want to pay that much."
Right, right. I'm
So, yeah,
curious. I mean, you've built it that far, and then I mean, there's two things that happen. I don't know the cruise ship if that happened before that
that's
time
later.
or
No,
afterwards.
it
That's
was
later.
later.
We
After,
need
yeah.
to hear the cruise ship story and also
Okay.
how they exit because you have sold this company to Alaska Airlines even, and I mean
Hmm.
that's a big thing to sell a company like that successfully.
Yes.
So let us know about the cruise
Okay.
ship first.
Well, in so this was 99 that we hired the COO and the CFO, but a couple of years before that we had decided to bring on some advisors, and we called it our outside board of directors. They didn't have any stock in the company, and we didn't pay them except with free trips to Hawaii, but these were
Okay.
very, very high level executives in the business industry in Alaska. One of them was in banking, one was in groceries, the other one was tourism, and they advised us. And with their help, we were able to really pull back and have that very high level view of what was
Yep.
going on with our business and the industry as a whole. And we were seeing that Alaska Airlines was starting to inch towards flying to Hawaii. We could see certain things that they were doing. They weren't making any announcements about it, but
Mhm.
my husband noticed that they were starting to get certification for their airplanes to fly
Uh,
over
uh,
water, extended
yep.
over water. And he
Competition.
said, yeah, he said, okay, they're not doing that because they're going to fly from Seattle to New York, or, that's not over water. And their route system at that time had been pretty much started with just up and down the West Coast. And then they started to expand to the East. And they were flying to Mexico, but that still wasn't extended over water because you could kind of fly, over the land to get to Mexico. So it's like, okay, if they're doing that, they've got their eye on Hawaii. And we knew that it would just be a matter of time before, they would start on the West Coast with Los Angeles or San Francisco or Seattle.
Yep.
And then they'd eye Anchorage because it was no secret that we were doing quite well.
Mhm.
The numbers of passengers flying is public knowledge. The Department of
Yeah.
Transportation, publishes the statistics of how many
You
people are
had
using Anchorage International Airport. So
yeah,
they
you had
knew.
opened the market for them basically already. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and we had already competed. As Hawaiian Airlines tried to compete with us at one point, we won. Northwest Airlines competed with us, we won. And then the idea of competing against Alaska Airlines was like, okay. And with the help of our advisors, we realized, this one's different. This one is going to be a different story, and we could compete with them, but we would be slashing our fares,
Mhm.
getting down. The profits would go away, maybe. They wouldn't make any money either. And so we decided that we would position ourselves to be purchased, and that the message to them, which we hired an investment banking firm to put the package together and to make the pitch for us, we said it's
Smart
cheaper.
move.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's cheaper for them
Yeah.
to buy the market
Yep.
than to win it. And we were the market. And if you were in Alaska and you were going to go to Hawaii, you were going to use Hawaiian Vacations.
Yeah. Excellent. I mean, that
Yeah.
makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by that time, our company, our team, our culture was so good, and we were taking such good care of our customers. We went from our customers complaining about us to just loving us, just absolutely loyal. We had people going to Hawaii several times a year, and that repeat business, of course, is what drove the numbers way up. So, yeah, we did a very good job of getting the loyalty of our passengers, of our customers,
Yeah.
and they would have a hard time beating us.
But
So, so they knew that.
I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, so basically, if I remember correctly, that was about 25 years in. Like that was from the talk before we start
Yeah.
recording?
Well, we started making the pitch probably 23 years in,
Okay.
and it
Yeah.
took a couple of years to convince them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, and
Yeah.
then, I mean, and you already had structured your business in a way so that it ran as a machine, like probably was
Yeah.
decoupled from you personally and your husband.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah. So
exactly what you need
in
at that
fact,
point. Yeah.
we bought a second home on Maui, and
Hmm.
then we moved personally to Sitka, where we are now,
Hmm.
because my husband loved boating, and the boating is better here. It's a longer season because we're much further south than
Hmm.
Anchorage. So we
Yep.
were away. We weren't even in the office much at all. We would visit from time to time, and we had
Yeah.
meetings. And in those days, we were starting to be able to have telephone conferences. Not really, Zoom hadn't really taken off at that point, but we were still being able to communicate. And so, yeah, we were starting to look at other things. We were investing in real estate. We were doing other things. And we looked at, okay, what would happen to our people, our Ohana, once Alaska Airlines took over?
Hmm.
Where would they go? Alaska Airlines wasn't going to keep our staff because they were going to shut us down because
Okay.
they didn't want us. They wanted the market.
Hmm.
So we thought, okay, how can we do something? We had this infrastructure, we had the reservation system, we had the office, all of this.
Hmm.
It's like, well, what do we do? And we found out that there were a couple of small cruise ships sitting at a dock in Seattle that were owned by a bank because the cruise line that had operated them had gone bankrupt. And
Oh,
so
okay.
these ships were just rotting at the dock. And so
Mhm.
we talked to the bank that owned them and said, what if we bought these ships from you?
Okay.
And we thought we would just start a small cruise line. And, my family had done it, so I could do it too.
Mhm.
No big deal. So we did that. We made an offer. The bank
Yep.
accepted the offer, and then we hired a company to do the due diligence, which meant sending divers down to check out the hull.
Yeah. Yep.
They were steel hulls, and they needed to measure the steel. And Coast Guard had regulations about how thick the steel needed to be throughout the hull. So
Yep.
you were measuring it, many points on the hull, and the report came back. You need more steel. You need to build it back up because over the
Okay.
years of just sitting there,
I wrote it.
this,
Uh,
yeah, degradation of the steel.
Yep.
So we went back to the bank and said, okay, it's going to cost this much, X amount to replenish the steel. You need to reduce the price by that much. And they said,
Yep.
no.
Mhm.
So we said, okay, fine. Enjoy holding on to these ships for as long as you want. You're paying the
Yep.
mortgage, the insurance, the security, the utilities. Enjoy. We walked away. And then, the company closed its doors, and we just dismantled our team. We, gave people exit packages, compensated them for staying with us and so forth, and helped them find jobs. And so we were done. Well, 2 years later, another bank owned the ships because the bank that made that bad decision, they went
Yep.
under. Like,
Uh,
go
yeah.
figure.
Yeah.
Smart. Um, so the bank that took over the assets of the prior bank called my husband and said, those ships that you tried to buy, would you like them now? And he said, well, no, we don't need them now. I mean, the reason we were going to buy them, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So no. And she said, well, they're going to hit the auction block on Friday, and lowest bidder's going to get them. And she even said, I've got a turd in my pocket and it's starting to smell. So she wanted to get rid of those ships.
Yeah.
So we looked at each other and was like, well, what do we do? But we knew about this cruise line that was operated by a friend of ours. And we called him and said, if we got these ships, would you operate them? Could we lease them to you, and would you operate them for us? Because we didn't have the infrastructure or the team
Yeah.
to run a cruise line. And so he said, yeah, I'd love to, because they had just even smaller ships. Their biggest ship was like 36 passengers, and they would love to have the additional capacity that these two ships would bring them. And then we said, yeah, but this is like the summer of 2009, and it's too late to put them into the market for 2010 because the cycle of Alaska tourism is like 18 months in advance. You start promoting
Yep.
your product. So my husband said, we can't do it. And I said, oh no, don't worry about it because we're paying so little because at that point we were able to buy the ships for like 18 cents on the dollar compared to what we would have paid 2 years prior. I said,
Wow.
they're so cheap. We'll just sit on them for a year. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
We'll
Yep.
market them for 2011
hmm
season.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. And
Wow.
we poured money when we bought them, and then we poured money into fixing the hulls and fixing everything. I mean, everything needed to be like just totally redone because they had
Yeah.
just gone to pot sitting at the
Mhm.
dock. They were awful. Nobody had cleaned them or anything. It was,
Oh.
so
Yeah.
so all new soft goods, furniture,
Yeah.
upholstery, everything.
Everything. Yeah.
So it took, the better part of, a year and a half to get them ready to go into service.
Mm.
So those were our first 2 ships. And then another cruise line went bankrupt, and
Okay.
we were approached by the bank that had secured the loan to that company that was secured by 3 ships. They said, please buy this loan from us. We want out. We don't want these
Yeah.
ships. So we bought the loan, which of course was quite discounted. And
Mhm.
so now we had 3 more ships. So now
Wow.
we had a fleet of 5 ships. And of course we went to the same cruise line and said, you want 3 more ships? And
Yep.
they said, sure. But we didn't put
Okay.
them all into the market at the same time. Again, it took time to get title to the ships. They had to wait to go through marshal sale and all kinds of stuff to get them out of the bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And but
Am I
the
getting
time,
this right? Quick
the time,
question. I mean, this is so
yeah,
interesting. Am I getting this right? That basically the way you built this business is you were the owners of the ships and you had a partner that operated them and you were in the business of ownership rather than doing the actual work.
yeah, yeah. My
Love
job
it.
was to make sure that the lease payments hit the bank every month.
Yep. Yep.
And if
So
they
you made
didn't,
the
I would
right deal
call.
with the
Yeah.
operators. So the
Mm-hmm.
cash flow came in, you
Mm-hmm.
have your cut and you,
Mm-hmm.
right,
Yeah. And
got it.
we poured the money in, and the more money we poured in, the higher the lease rate was. There
hmm
was a formula.
Yep.
So we did all of that. And then the cruise line, when we started doing the charges, they said, eventually we're going to want to buy these ships because we're going to want them on our balance sheet. And instead of just paying lease payments, we'd rather own them.
Yeah.
So we
So
said
the next exit is coming now.
that makes sense. So
Uh-huh.
a few years later, we started selling the ships, one by one.
Mhm.
And by the time 2020 hit, we were down to 1 ship. So in March of 2020, the owner of the cruise line called us and said, we're tied up to a dock. We can't operate.
Yeah. Right.
Everything was shut down. Cruise ships worldwide were just parked.
Yep.
And we said, oh boy, okay. So what do we do now? So then we started again looking at the world. What is happening? Remember the book Who Moved the Cheese? We were trying to figure out where the cheese had moved with this
Yeah.
COVID thing. What
Yep.
was going to be the next best thing? And we decided that multifamily real estate would be the next thing. And so we started learning about, and we joined with a mentoring company and joined their mastermind program and learned how to invest in multifamily syndications. And we
Yeah.
started doing that in 2021.
Rel.
And yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So maybe I can see maybe we have enough material to even do another episode in the future. I'm hearing there's a ton of new stories and learnings coming right now. But for
Yeah.
this episode, I think we have a nice tourism world that just opened up with airplanes and cruise ships right now, thanks to you. So I'd be curious, maybe 2 last questions. So
Okay.
before I'm asking the last question about the cruise ship, the last cruise ship, what happened to that one? I'd be curious,
Okay.
like, because you have shown us, like, I mean, you have tremendous experience that you've built over the decades, and
Hmm.
you've built those businesses, you have sold those businesses, you have made those learnings to build the businesses also in a way that they work as a system, and
Hmm.
you have created your own freedom. So, and
Hmm.
that's also something you are helping other business owners with to, achieve more of. So, for
Yes.
whoever is listening and is interested in that, what's the best way to get in contact with you? Just let us know the right links and touch
Yes.
point.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for asking. So ralwest.com is my website. And if you want to find out like what's going on with your business right now and how stuck in your business are you and just how much of a bottleneck you might be in your own business, we've got a quiz funnel that you can find on the website and will also be on my LinkedIn pages. You can find me with Ral West on LinkedIn. And I also have a YouTube channel, which guess what? It's named Ral West. So lots of information out there. And
Yeah.
the quiz, you can take the quiz and get an assessment as to where you are in your business. It's like, are you the overwhelmed owner operator, or are you working towards freedom and stepping back and being just the owner and not the operator? Because I think
Yep.
that's the goal. And that's why I want to do this right now, is that I see too many entrepreneurs who are doing too much themselves. And my message to them is stop doing it all. There's a way out of this. You can have your business success and have a life. And I believe that that's worth working towards.
Yeah,
And
we 100% agree. Yeah.
yeah, and I will help you. I know how to do it because, I did it. And I can do it much faster for you. It took us years and years. I can teach you how to do it in much less time.
Yeah. So ralwest.com, that's for you if you're that person. And now last
Yeah.
question for you, Ral. What happened to this last cruise ship when everything was docked? How did you get out of this, and how
Yeah.
did you make that
Well,
twist?
we sold it to the same
Okay.
cruise line. And the cruise line is Uncruise Adventures, by the way, in Seattle.
Uh-huh.
They're a wonderful cruise line. And they come to Alaska. We see them cruising by our house here in Sitka. And they bought that last vessel from us. And so we didn't do as well on the last ship because, of course, it had lost value because it wasn't used for a couple of years and it wasn't making any money. But overall, in the about 12 years that we had that business, we did quite well overall.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Wow. Congratulations. You had a whole fleet of cruise ships. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited because I'm a huge fan personally also of traveling. You have built multiple
Oh,
travel business very successfully. That's
yes.
awesome. So
Yeah.
again, Rel, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, sharing the insights and all of those great inspiring stories.
Oh, well, you're welcome. It's been fun. It's fun to talk about myself, huh?
Yep, appreciate you. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Rel. Bye.
Thank you, Robert.
Go to rockandrollyourdreams.com/podcast.